The young man sat at the kitchen table of the Cayce home on West 7th Street, looking miserable, staring into the cup of coffee set before him. His mother, a gray-haired woman with a tired, pretty face, sat opposite him, looking at his downcast head and bent shoulders. "Well, I'm glad you came, anyhow. It's nice to see you. I know you're working too hard, staying at the studio all day, and being up with Gertrude at night. You shouldn't bother even to talk with these people who come here to do their so-called investigations. If you ask me, I think most of them are bigger fakes than the poor soul they try to bedevil. They go and get a little learning and then run around being superior to everybody else." He didn't bother me, Mother, except to start me bothering myself again. I could see his viewpoint, standing there, asking me questions, and comparing the answers with what he knows to be true in science. I kept realizing more and more that the only answer that to me would answer the whole thing satisfactorily would just make him certain that I'm crazy. His mother nodded. Everybody takes it for granted, even the best Christians, the ministers and missionaries, that the things that happened in the days of the Bible and the days of the saints can't happen now, she said. That's the trouble. If it had happened to an angel, it'd be all right. But I'm no angel. There are so many people who are better than I am. Why did it happen to me, unless it's the work of the devil? His mother got up and took her Bible from the kitchen shelf. "Good men," she said, "always worry about that. You'll find it in here everywhere you look. You know that. It's the people who are actually the tools of the devil who never worry about whether they are wrong or right. They're sure they are right. But we're sure the readings are right. So long as you are right, son, they will be right. The devil cannot speak through a righteous man. I saw the Diedrich girl on the street yesterday. She's a beautiful girl and as bright as can be. There's proof on every street in this town that the readings are right. As long as I'm sure of you, I'm sure of the readings," she said. "And I'm still sure of you." The women in Edgar Cayce's family were the first to affirm his intuitive nature. Sarah Cayce, his paternal grandmother, knew about the times he spoke to her deceased husband, Edgar's grandfather. It was their secret. Next to his mother, his grandmother was his best friend. His mother Carrie also understood him. They just talked about everything and anything, and that was why he liked her best of all. She never laughed at him or teased him, so he never was afraid to tell her what he thought. She never needed to scold him, because he knew that she didn't like to. So he always did what she asked, and even more. It was nice to be with her and do things for her. She was a good friend. Carrie Major Cayce was born in 1855 in Christian County, Kentucky. She married Leslie B. Cayce in 1874 and had 5 surviving children, Edgar and his 4 sisters, Annie, Ola, Mary, and Sarah. Carrie nurtured Edgar's intuitive nature and always remained a firm supporter of the readings. The information helped her physically. After suffering for 35 years from asthma, Edgar wrote that she was practically free of the condition after using the inhalants given in her health readings. In a letter to a friend shortly after Carrie's death in 1926, Edgar wrote, "As possibly you have heard, I was called home about the 20th, and my mother passed away on the 26th. Though I was forewarned and knew that it must surely come, still the actual fact, the actual experience was hard indeed to bear. She had meant so much to all of us, and I know that she is in heaven, yet there seems to be a something that will not set itself aright. No one, I am sure, could ever have had more encouraging words spoken to them from their dying mother. No one could ever be encouraged to go on and try to apply the information as may be obtained through this work, as Mother's counsel in the last hours did me." When the Cayce Hospital opened in 1929, a small plaque on the front facade dedicated the fountain to Carrie's memory. Annie, the eldest of the girls, who was called Sister by the family, was working in Mrs. Ada Lane's millinery shop. Annie was a pretty girl, shorter than her younger sisters, and more heavy-set, with dark gray eyes and light brown hair. She was chief adorer of her big brother. Ola was next. She was the student of the family, a tall, slender, dark-haired girl who was leading her class in high school, specializing in bookkeeping and business training. Mary was the next daughter, ready now for high school, and Sarah was the baby, still in pigtails. Edgar had close relationships with his 4 sisters, but it was Annie who participated most directly in the work. She joined the staff of the Cayce Hospital to help care for the patients. When the hospital closed, she and her sister Sarah ran a small rest home on 22nd Street in Virginia Beach to help continue the healing work. Financial pressures meant that Annie had to close the home and move back to Kentucky. But she wrote Edgar in 1933 that I will always count the 4 years spent at the beach close to you and your family one of the bright spots in my life. Gertrude Cayce's voice speaks the softest in the archive. She left us no diaries, nor many letters. We see the image of the dutiful wife, the famous conductor of the readings, but we must look more diligently to find the real person behind the legend. What is wonderful about the Edgar Cayce Foundation archive collection is that we can find these small details, if we look hard enough, that can give us more insight into Gertrude's personality and how she lifted up the people around her. We have an excellent primary source document available to us, Gertrude's eldest son Hewlin's unpublished biographical sketch of his mother. His words show how Gertrude Cayce acted as the strong tether to the physical world for her family. Through her intelligence and resourcefulness, she built a nurturing home wherever they went, made sure there was food on the table, and helped her husband glean the most beneficial and detailed information from his readings. Hewlin begins his manuscript with a vignette from his parents' early marriage. In their photography studio, Edgar took the pictures, and Gertrude took care of the customers, as she was tactful and gracious in showing sample picture, in his words. She also worked behind the scenes. With her dexterity with the tinting brush, blemishes and bad wrinkles disappeared as if by magic, and on the finished prints, touches of color in the cheeks, eyes, and sometimes clothes appealed to many subjects. Edgar and Gertrude worked as partners to make the studio successful. Not very long after their marriage, Gertrude had to contend with the problems Edgar encountered as a person in the public eye. Stress from national publicity in the 1910s culminated in a court case between Edgar and his business partners, Dr. Ketchum and A.D. No. According to Hewlin, Ketchum and No used the readings to get insider information on horse racing in the grain market. Gertrude encouraged Edgar to break the partnership, and as a family, they took the consequences of losing the legal suit that followed, namely a move away from Kentucky to a new life in Alabama. The Cayces lived in Selma, Alabama for about a decade, and Gertrude rebuilt their social circle. Hewlin says she was an excellent conversationalist, skillful at playing table games, and her friendliness drew people to her. Their door was always open. In Alabama, their guests were most often members of Edgar's Sunday school class, where Gertrude was the center of this group of young married couples. A favorite evening included what was called a box supper. The ladies prepared beautifully decorated large boxes of food for two, containing their best gastronomic creations. Those boxes were auctioned off, and the man buying the box ate dinner with the unknown young lady. Gertrude's boxes were always recognized and brought high prices, all for special charities espoused by class number 7. The Cayces would move many more times, and each time, Gertrude fostered the same sense of community, even without the same level of abundance. Hewlin observed Gertrude's central place in all activities, especially during the early days of the A.R.E. in Virginia Beach. He wrote, "Gertrude brought to every family discussion, every review of the contents of a reading, every commentary about people, carefully reasoned suggestions and shrewd observations. She was practical while Edgar was visionary, logical when he was impulsive. Edgar worked to get the most detailed information he could to as many people as possible. Gertrude facilitated this mission, both as a resident conductor and a skilled household manager. In the early 1940s, the Cayce home was a hive of activity. Edgar hired more office staff to deal with the influx of reading requests. Boarders moved into the upstairs bedrooms, and newcomers to Edgar's work were constantly showing up to the front door. Hugh Lynn described their living room as being a little bit like Grand Central Station. Gertrude planned the meals, did the marketing, and cooked for an average of 6 people a day. She drove to the post office to pick up the bags of letters that were so large the postal workers refused to deliver them to the house. When Thomas Segru arrived to recuperate and finish There Is a River, Gertrude made sure he had excellent care and all the space and time he needed to write Edgar's story. Gertrude didn't write her own story. We can only study the traces she left in the archival record, which are more than enough to tell us she was a woman who loved her family. She demonstrated this love through the balancing act she performed between explorations of intuitive phenomena and an incredible amount of domestic labor. Her life was not easy in many ways, but her power to thrive despite the challenges she faced will always inspire.